And welcome back to Community Couch Time, a daily talk show where we talk about things that are important, things that are happening in our community, in our state, in this country, and internationally. Oftentimes, the topics that we discuss are ones that others aren't talking about. And the question is, why aren't we? Good morning and welcome back to Community Couch Time. Today is a beautiful day and we are here again with Miss Wallace. How are you, Miss Wallace?
I'm doing so fantastic, Miss Cardona. I'm enjoying the spring. We're both wearing blue again. Another coincidence. Blue floral. Hello. The flowers are in bloom. So I know we're here to celebrate another incredible woman in history. One of my favorite authors, Octavia Butler.
Yeah, I have been super blessed over the time that we've been, friends, that I've gotten to hear a lot about the different books. I've been inspired. I've gotten some. I have some actually on my shelf. I need to sit down and start reading. Wild Seed, I think, is the first one I'm going to start with. But so we are going to celebrate her because this is Women's History Month, and she is an amazing human being that did really beautiful things with her writing. And we're also really, looking at her because she actually, we just celebrated the 15 years of her passing at the end of February. So it's a really like a good time to just like keep her alive, right? Keep her spirit alive, keep her writing alive, and to honor her. And hopefully those of you watching will be inspired to pick up an Octavia Butler book as well. But for right now, I want to know, like, tell us about your history, like your family history with Octavia Butler and how she became special to you.
Well, my mom was really interested in science fiction. And even just as little kids, she was very encouraging of our imagination. And she actually made these space helmets out of paper bags and like cut the hole out of them. I'll share the picture with you so that we look like astronauts and felt like it as well. And it was so fun. So
cute.
So she just, inspired my mother, and then my mother inspired myself and my sister to be interested in science fiction and also what's called speculative fiction, which is where you consider what is the future going to be? What's the future hold? And that's almost unheard of, especially for Black people and people of color. And so she was writing about that. That's why we get the term Afro Futurism, which is what's the future for Black people? What's the future for Indigenous people and people of color and Asian people and white people, whoever? What does our future look like? But specifically focused on Black people as main characters, which is almost unheard of. So
thank you for sharing that. That's really beautiful.
She was so incredible. And even just in one of her books, Parable of the Talents, which is part 2 of Parable of the Sower. This is another book of hers.
Beautiful.
Try to get the glare away, but it's about the future and climate change and what happens with climate change. And I'd like to read a short passage for you that I think you may see some similar language. All right, just very briefly.
Sounds good.
I couldn't help wondering, though, whether these people with their crosses had some connection to my current least favorite presidential candidate, Texas Senator Andrew Steele Jarrett. It sounds like the sort of thing his people might do, a revival of something nasty out of the past. Do the Ku Klux Klan wear crosses as well as burn them? The Nazis wore swastika, which is a kind of cross, but I don't think that they wore it on their chest. There were crosses all over the place during the Inquisition and before that during the Crusades. So now we have another group that uses crosses and slaughters people. Jarrett's people could be behind it. Jarrett insists on being a throwback to some earlier, simpler time. Now does not suit him. Religious tolerance does not suit him. The current state of the country does not suit him. He wants to take us all back to some magical time when everyone believed in the same God, worshiped him in the same way, and understood that their safety in the universe depended on completing the same religious rituals and stomping anyone who was different. There was no such a time in this country. But these days, when more than half the people in the country can't read at all, history is just one more vast unknown to them. Jared supporters have been known now and then to form mobs and burn people at the stake for being witches. Witches! In 2032, a witch in their view tends to be a Muslim, a Jew, a Hindu, a Buddhist, or in some parts of the country, a Mormon, a Jehovah's Witness, or even a Catholic. A witch may also be an atheist, a cultist, or a well-to-do eccentric. And well-to-do eccentrics often have no protectors or much that's worth stealing. And cultist is a great catch-all term for anyone who fits into no other large category and yet doesn't quite match Jared's version of Christianity. Jared's people have even been known to beat or drive out Unitarians, for goodness sake. Jared condemns the burnings, but does so in such mild language that his people are free to hear what they want to hear. As for the beatings, the tarring and feathering, and the destruction of heathen houses of devil worship, he has a simple answer. Join us. Our doors are open to every nationality, every race. Leave your sinful past behind and become one of us. Help us to make America great again.
Wow. Wow. Okay, so this is taking place in 2032.
It takes place in 2032, but she wrote this in 1998.
1998. Now that shows how forward-thinking, how observant and analytical Octavia Butler is, and deserves a lot of credit for that. I am going to go to a clip.
To talk more about Octavia Butler's legacy, we're joined by the writer and activist Adrienne Maree Brown. She and the musician Toshi Regan co-host Octavia's Parables, a podcast that dives deeply into Octavia Butler's books, Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. Adrienne Maree Brown is also co-editor of the book Octavia's Brood, Science Fiction Stories from Social Justice Movements. She's joining us from Detroit. It's great to have you with us, Adrienne. In fact, the last time we had you on, we were talking about Octavia. If you can just briefly talk about her biography and then her significance in the world of literature, but also this visionary look at what's happening today.
Yes. Well, thanks for the opportunity to share. I love speaking about Octavia. I'll talk about her every day if I can. She gave us 12 novels and a collection of short stories, and she took us, as she took herself from California. She drove across country to get the story for Kindred. She took herself north to Seattle, and one of the most famous stories that we just heard about, the Parables, is her protagonist character making her way north. And as Octavia learned, and as she questioned, and as she wondered how were humans going to find a way to survive on this planet, she asked those questions and brought them into the text. And in her text, we see all the ways that she was trying to answer those questions, trying to trouble the waters, trying to give us nothing easy, but something super compelling to look forward to. So the work that she did, Walida E. Marisha and I, when we did Octavia's Brood, Walida called it visionary fiction, to look ahead at the future and then write ourselves in. And that's what Octavia was doing with all of her work.
And talk about her life, what led her to write. We've heard some of her describing that herself. And the whole genre of Afro Futurism, what that means.
Yeah, so she talks about this, that when she was, I think, 9, 10 years old, she saw The Devil Girl from Mars, and she said, I could write something better than that. And so she started to write things. She started to write her own short stories, her own novels. And she had the idea for the Patternist series when she was quite young and kept writing it, kept writing it. It ended up being her first novel. She wrote the series backwards. So if you read the stories, I always love knowing that when you read The Pattern Master, that was the first one, but then she wrote backwards to find out the source of that story, how we would get there. But she was a worker, so she was a laborer. She was always working, and her writing process would be waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning because she needed to do it. She had what she called positive obsession, a positive obsession with moving these stories out. And I think it would be remiss of me not to say that just like many of us, she was looking at the world around her and feeling terrified and feeling like, how are we going to change this? What happens if this goes on? And it led her to write things that ended up feeling very prophetic. You know, in the parables, there's a president who runs for office on the slogan, Make America Great. And there's a way that she took what was happening around her, what she saw as a very shy, introverted, powerful Black woman, with a super sexy underbite. She was looking at the world around her and figuring out, like, how do I think about community? How do I think about organizing? How do I think about change? And so that's how she did it in her lifetime. She wrote it onto these pages for us. Afrofuturism, I will say, is a thrilling arena. And now there's African futurism, there's Black speculative fiction, there's all these arenas where basically Black people and people of African lineage are saying, we were almost erased from the lineage, right? People wanted to erase us and have us just be labor. We're writing ourselves back in. We're writing ourselves back in. We're creating stories that are rooted in African heritage and that articulate an African future. So it's an exciting place. It's an exciting arc to be inside of as a creator.
She is also seen, obviously, as a deeply feminist writer. How are women, especially Black women, represented in her work? And how do they grapple with the real-world power structures? I mean, even the publishing world. You have this example of, in 1987, the publisher still insisted on putting 2 white women on the jacket of her novel, Dawn, whose main character is Black.
Yes. I mean, so much has changed there because of the work of Octavia, because of the work of Nnedi Okorafor, because of the work of Tananarive Due. But I think one of the things that was so powerful to me when I first picked up Octavia is that she wrote these strong Black feminine characters, these protagonists, who now you might look back and see the non-binary, see the queerness, see other things in them. But at the time, she was writing these characters and it was like, oh, there's young Black women and they're leading. And what happened over and over again in the stories, and you see this over and over again, is that people doubted their capacity not only to lead, but to be of use in any way. And then her characters, rather than pushing, rather than fighting, they would turn inward, they would gather themselves and get aligned with what they thought. So in the parables, it's the earth seed belief system. They would get aligned and be like, I have a greater destiny than your oppression. And my destiny will take me beyond anything that your oppression can hold me from. And then over and over again, we watch those characters follow that path of destiny and take themselves and anyone who wants to come with them beyond, which I also think is important because she wrote about Black women and about Black feminism, about Black futures, but she wrote in a way that appealed to all human beings. And I think that to me is one of the essence of feminism. It's like, we're not saying we're better than or beyond. We're saying we are right here, equal to anyone else and able to lead as much as anyone else. So she understood that. She wrote it beautifully. There, but she was a worker.
Yes. Oh my gosh, Ms. Cardona, thank you so much for sharing that with me. I have Octavia's Brood. It's an amazing collection of stories. And I like what she said, like, it's not better than anyone else, but like, we're going to tell our own story. And if you feel like, hey, I'm not seeing enough representation for like who I am, if you're a queer person or a person with disabilities or Chicano person or brown person or Black person or whoever you identify, you don't see that. I think it's important to be like, okay, I'm not seeing it and that's wrong. But like, what are we going to do in response? Create the work that you want to see. write the book that you want to read. Paint what you would want to see in art. You have the ability to do that. And I feel like this is what I see from Octavia's Brood, because it is a variety of authors. There's Vietnamese authors, there's Latino and indigenous authors, there's Black authors, there's all these people who have been inspired by Octavia Butler, and they're writing through their own story, through their own lens, whether they're writing Black characters or Asian characters, whoever, it's their own mind and their own story, and they're just inspired. And I love it.
I love seeing your excitement, and it's super beautiful. And yes, Octavia Butler, presente. And that takes us to our community Couch Time Daily Journal question. I'm just going to really piggyback off what you just said, right? Like, what are the stories that you need to write? What are the stories that that you need to write, either about the past or the future, or connecting the past to the future, that that are important, that no one should forget? We want to know. In la catch.
In la catch. Oh.
In la catch. There you go.
In la catch, yeah.
Or how about in la catch?
Yeah.
Those are our bloopers.